We've made it to another Monster Monday, the best way to start your week. We're getting mechanical this Monday as I team up yet again with Cam McLoud to bring another one of his creations online. Dig deep and unbury the bionic beast, the Grounder.
That's right!
Before we begin, we're now on Patreon. You can get builds and monsters 3 weeks early there, as well as unique items and extra content. Even a little bit helps us go a long way. Designed after a Wolverine, this is another one of his original concepts that is masterfully illustrated by Spooky Activity. The Grounder fills a similar role to many of the other machines from the Horizon series, in that it collects parts and resources by breaking down remnants of the old world. However, while most of these machines return these gathered materials back to a facility or central location, the Grounder can make a bit more use out of them. It's able to reconstitute its own being with these processed parts, and I wanted to expand on that ability by also featuring an effect to enhance its attacks in a similar way. In Cam's own words, he did want this to be akin to a bullet, occupying a somewhat similar design space, which I did try to invoke. But before I start gushing too much about what the Grounder can do, we should go over what it actually is. With a level of 6, the Grounder is apparently more potent than the bullet of D&D, but actually falls 2 levels short of the Pathfinder bullet. I felt like that was fine, which just meant that I had to add in the standard traits that I use for these creatures of construct, robot, and tech. Going off of some of the stuff that I talked about with Cam, I decided to design the Grounder as a brute. Between that and Cam's own design, I opted to start with a high strength, but decided to match that with a high constitution as well, making it a burly bionic beast. Its wisdom is actually a tiny bit better than its low dexterity, since it is just a teensy bit too heavy to move as nimbly-bimbly as it might want. With that lower wisdom and its nature as a brute, I decided to incorporate a low perception. Now this does come with dark vision and an imprecise tremor sense, since this is a burrowing creature, calling to mind its relation to the bullet. I designed the Grounder with only one skill, that being a high athletics skill. I considered using a moderate value for this, but did end up making it part of its overall kit, so that did push me towards a higher value instead. For our cybernetic savage's defenses, we start with a moderate armor class, and couple that with a moderate pool of hit points as well. This might seem a bit odd for a brute, but there's a few things to take into account here. Firstly, the Grounder has a whole host of immunities as a construct. It does have some weaknesses, but it also has a pretty ubiquitous resistance along with that. Now if you target its high AC components, you might be able to bypass that a little bit by blowing up its blaze canister. Beyond that though, there are a few more aspects that determine the defensive values I used here, so let's wrap up with its saving throws and try to get into the really neat stuff. With a high constitution going for a monstrous machine, it uses a high fortitude save, but we do switch things up just a tiny bit by using a moderate will save. This is a bit off from the usual monsters of this sort that I make, which does leave it with a low reflex save. It needs to have that weakness in there for the heroes to take advantage of, and this again calls back to its blaze canister that the heroes can potentially detonate. The Grounder has 2 whole strikes to its name, both of which are melee in nature. Its claws have a high attack bonus and the agile trait, which contributes to the use of a high damage value for them. This plays into it being a brute, which is further explored with its moderate attack bonus jaws that have an extreme damage value. This attack also has the grab ability, which is further explored through a few of its other abilities, but is the main reason behind a high athletics bonus. As we get into its abilities, I do want to start out with the parts related to the bullet, and that is primarily its leaping charge. This is a pretty standard and straightforward effect. It requires the Grounder to make a jump, whether it be a long or high jump, and it gets to make a strike at the apex or end of this jump. Now if it jumps far enough, it can instead make 2 claw strikes at the same multiple attack penalty, which is a pretty potent power-up. From there, I talked about the Grounder using the grab action, and that it relates to an ability that it has. That ability is present in the form of grind. This eponymous ability of sorts has a lot of similarities to the standard constrict effect, and maybe I could have just used that instead. However, this is visualized by the Grounder running its teeth, usually used to saw through metals and minerals, to mince meat instead. As such, it deals unlimited use area damage with a high DC save, but a creature that critically fails this save also takes persistent bleed damage as their body is grated and shredded. The Grounder can make further use of these Chainjaws through the Spray Dirt action. This allows it to launch a spray of earth and matter that deals in between limited and unlimited use area damage at a high DC. The Dazzled applied by failing the save against it is perhaps a little Pokemon inspired, as they get the dirt and grit in their eyes, temporarily reducing their accuracy. While this is done by the Grounder running its jaws against the dirt, to fully build up the necessary matter for this, it needs to do some dirt diving and burrow at least 20 feet to actually recharge this. That leaves us with two final abilities, both of which tap into the Grounder Scavenge engine, as well as another character that might take some inspiration from the animal that our automaton is based off of. The Scavenge engine component has 30 hit points, which is abnormally high for a component at this level, and furthermore it can be recharged as long as the Grounder finds the proper resources to do so. Now this is all because I wanted to have it play directly into a few of its other abilities. First among them is Recycle. This is more directly pulled from Cam's design, but where he had it activate this effect to simply roll a set number of hit points, I designed this to actually work a bit similar to the Mystic's Vitality pool, although the Grounder is pulling from itself rather than a different source. Now this reduces the Scavenge engine hit points to restore the Grounder's actual hit points, and it can be used to resemble fast healing, or simply shore up dwindling hit points. If you use all of these points to heal it, it actually ends up having high hit points for its level, instead of the moderate value that we originally looked at. However, that's not all the use it has for this scrap. It can alternatively extend claws, infusing scavenged material into their deadly edges for a brief boost. This costs 5 HP from the Scavenge engine, and while it causes the Grounder's claws to lose the Agile trait, they do instead gain reach, tearing, and they increase their damage to right between high and extreme. This lasts until the end of its next turn, which means that the Grounder can make at most 5 attacks with these souped up slicers. Though, I suppose some discretion might be advised lest it chews up its own extra HP in an effort to eviscerate its enemies. And that is our bot build. A rapacious, rampaging robot, this replica of a real-life Ravager rips and rends retired rust buckets and risky rescuers with regular roughness in a ruthless ruckus. Per Cam's own considerations, the Grounder takes inspiration from the Bullet, so if you're hankering to throw one at your players, but they just aren't at that level yet, why not Zoidberg? Now if I were to run them, I might actually make them follow hit and run tactics, retreating after depleting their Scavenge engine to refill and refuel so they can return for the rending. I can also totally see creatures like these being corrupted and repurposed by some Xenodruid or something like that as enforcers and pets. Let me know what you think of the critter and what other monsters I should make. If you dig this one, let me know with a like and a subscribe. I want to give a big thanks to everybody on the Patreon, with a special shout out to the Orc Overlords, that being Decaffeinate, Robert Miller, Shai Binster, and Vorthis. You too could head on over there for early access to the vids and extra content. Either way, thanks for watching and have a monstrous Monday.
Told you I was the best.